What is it that set us on the spiritual path? What is it that started to creep up through the cracks and help us to recognize that something isn't quite right with the way we're experiencing life or the universe? That the promises of how to become a happy person or be a deeply satisfied person seemed to be empty at some point, or at least partially empty. Did we recognize that successes in career and relationship didn't lead to lasting peace? Is it that we recognized we're spending more time in our mind and our thoughts, judging ourselves, trying to get things right in life, and still feeling like we are failing somehow? Was it that we feel like we're wrestling with our own emotions? That we don't just feel okay to be who we are in the moment, comfortable in our own skin? When did we recognize that we're suffering in the spiritual sense? At what point did we start to notice that this suffering is actually kind of pervasive in life? Maybe we're not the only ones suffering, or that we hide it under a layer of inauthenticity, or perhaps more than one layer of inauthenticity. Is it possible we are the lone sufferer in a world of other people who are suffering and feel quite alone? Is it possible that suffering is a pandemic among humans? So we get on this path because something doesn't feel right. And then we hear about a potential cure or a hack to get under that suffering, to get at what it is that's causing the discomfort. And so we learn some practices, or we have some shifts, some experiential insights. And at some point, we start to become very intimate with suffering itself. What is the nature of suffering? We can feel it in its raw form. We know how to access it. We're far less afraid of it. Instead of avoiding it with layers of identity, now we're oriented toward suffering. We're curious about it energetically. This is a spiritual maturity. Regardless of your insights, it's very important to come to this place where you have almost a reverence for suffering itself, because it's seen that there is nothing apart, nothing separate, nothing truly hidden, and nothing that could be hidden. So whatever suffering is, it's just part of this. It's intertwined with life itself. It has a certain kind of intelligence to it. It has a dynamism and almost a life force. So we become almost enamored with suffering. And when we do this, we find a hidden truth, a hidden gem. And that is that when we really and truly stop trying to end suffering, that's when we find the end to suffering. But you can't do it intellectually. You can't work the system. You have to really be willing to fully immerse yourself into life just as it is, unfiltered, without holding or hiding, and let everything be just as it is, including suffering. And when we're able to do this, we start to touch into equanimity. Equanimity is when there's no distance between what's happening and my internal experience, such that the internal experience becomes very quiet and there's just what's happening. the flow of life, just as it is perfectly okay. It was never corrupted. It was never a problem. This is a place of peace, the peace that passeth all understanding. This is where we fall in love with life. This is where unconditional love is seen to be what has been driving this process the whole entire time, and is merely directing you right back into your source, and then beyond your source, until there is only life left. There is only this. Purity, flow, spontaneity. And there's peace in movement, and there's peace in stillness. And there's no avoidance of suffering. As the Heart Sutra says, no suffering, no end to suffering. So can you find the place where there is neither suffering nor an end to suffering? It's right where you are. It can't be missed. It's just this, just as it is. The sounds and sensations, the movements, the fears, the doubts, the thoughts. Just this. This is peace. This is equanimity.